Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Wheeler Centre and to MIFF 2015. Thank you to Afters for this Talking Pictures panel. Today we're here to talk about posters and poster design. My name is Zak Hepburn, and I'm a pleasure to be with you. This evening we also have with us some esteemed graphic design warriors, including Sonny, who is one half of the We Buy Your Kids collective. The minds are really representative of fantastic work of the MIFF posters this year, so all those fantastic heads with the different emotions you've seen around Melbourne. We have a thanks to Sonny and We Buy Your Kids for that.
Thank you.
Also, he's done some impressive work for the Alamo Draft House marketing arm of Mondo, who any poster fans in the audience may have purchased one of those Mondos or paid a very high price on eBay, as I have as well. We also have Bernard Caleo with us. Bernard is a comics maker, publisher, preacher and teacher, a self-proclaimed preacher. I'm interested to know what you preach, Mr. Caleo.
There was a stand out there. I've got a plinth, I could preach from there. Hallelujah.
Bernard published the comics anthology Tango under his own imprint, Cardigan Comics, from 1997 to 2009. And in 2012, with filmmaker Daniel Hayward, he made the feature documentary Graphic Novels Melbourne. We also have Jeremy Saunders with us this afternoon. He's been described by Ain't It Cool News as one of the most interesting poster designers in the world today, and he's created key art for nearly over 250 films since 2002. We have Donna McCrum with us today as well. Donna's working on a slightly different spectrum of design. She's working on title sequences, and you would have seen her fantastic title sequences for feature films such as Cut Snake, Paper Planes, Galore, Somersault, and also in television, including works in Offspring, The Slap, Wonderland, Puberty Blues. And we also have Jason Lei Howden with us, the director of Deathgasm, which is featuring in MIFF 2015, has its Melbourne premiere this Saturday at 11:30 p.m. So if you need a little bit of a metal fix on a Saturday evening in Melbourne, you know where to get it. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Going through a lot of your kind of stuff here, we can see you get a lot of older properties through your affiliation with Mondo. We can touch on that a little bit later, but I'm kind of curious to know how you take something as, say, as iconic as Alien, which is we're seeing here, your take on it. How do you put your own spin on classic sort of sci-fi genre films, and what is your process with that with your creative partner?
Well, I mean, after I shit my pants when we get asked to do these movies, obviously we're dealing with stuff that has such vivid imagery, and it's kind of different to what we sort of started out doing, which was band posters, and you react to music in different ways, but when you actually have visual references and so much stuff out there to deal with, we kind of just want to take it back to, I guess, in a sense, the Polish stuff. And when we first started doing work for Mondo, they were like, oh, we really like your Polish style, but we weren't really aware of that at all. We were just doing our crazy pictures. So I guess what we're trying to do is that if we kind of come at it like this could be the poster for the movie, the original poster for it. So we want to kind of come up with something a little bit abstract, something a little bit, I guess, different, something that kind of grabs people's attention, because I think that's what a good poster needs to do. It kind of needs to, you need to be walking down the street and go, oh, what is that, And then it kind of piques your curiosity, and then you might go and see the film, It doesn't need to sort of spell out exactly what the movie's about. It just sort of needs to draw you in and get you interested. Then you can go and check out the trailer and everything else that happens these days.
Was film poster design an area that you envisioned getting into, or was that just something that sort of happened organically from doing sort of gig posters and other sort of...
Yeah, I mean, Biddy, before Biddy and I started working together, she worked at a studio in Sydney called Ant Art that did quite a lot of movie posters back in the day, and she worked on a few of those. But when we'd sort of been going for maybe 2 or 3 years, we got asked to do some sort of film poster work for smaller Australian things, but that kind of went away. And then when Mondo came to us, it was like, oh, cool. But no, to answer your question, no, like film posters was never on the agenda. Yeah.
For those who in the audience who don't know what Mondo is, as I mentioned in my introduction, Mondo is the sort of, I suppose you'd call it the merchandising arm of the Alamo Draft House Cinema, which is this large group of cinemas in Texas who do just really cool things. And
it'll basically spoil movies for you if you go to the Alamo Draft House, because they bring out beers and food, you can get fried chicken, and they basically just do fun stuff based around interesting properties and stuff like that. A few years ago, we went and saw Midnight in Paris, and they had an author who'd written like a cocktail book about Hemingway, And so this guy spoke for about half an hour before the movie started, and we got hammered on like 6 bourbon-based cocktails before the movie started. So, yeah.
In true Hemingway fashion.
It was fantastic. Yeah, someone might have taken their shirt off. I know I did.
And I mean, obviously, too, MondoCon is the large sort of poster, almost Comic-Con in a way that the Alamo Drafthouse and Fantastic Fest, which is this annual genre film festival in Austin, that's something that happened for the first time last year, and I know that you were present there. How is it for, I'm assuming like a lot of poster artists, and we can touch on this with our other guests shortly, don't often get that direct connection with people that are actually accessing their work. How did you find, actually meeting people who are fans of your work?
Oh, it was fantastic. Just to have that sort of, that one-on-one conversations with people, it was amazing, because you sort of live in this bubble, especially working from Australia, and you're dealing with like a market that's predominantly based in the States. It's kind of really refreshing to sort of meet these people that are into your work and have genuine conversations. And it was a really positive experience for us, and I only got into one fight, and
like a fist fight?
Oh, a knife fight in the car park. So I'm a bit rusty on my knife fighting skills, but I held my own.
Protractors at the ready.
Yeah, compasses at 20 paces, right?
Yeah. Really this year, I think the striking design of the MIFF Festival poster is something that we've all seen around Melbourne, and we've all been greeted with in the on-screen advertising. What was the process of being involved with that, and how did you sort of arrive at these very striking designs?
We were approached by an agency in Melbourne called McCann, who we dealt with through our awesome agents, the Jackie Winner Group here in Melbourne. And we kind of thought it was a bit of a joke when we got this email going, hey, do you want to do the artwork for MIFF? And we were like, nah, you're taking the piss. You're having a bit of a laugh. You're having a laugh. And we were just blown away, because we were such in awe of the festival's had amazing artwork for such a long time. So to be part of that visual history is amazing. But McCann gave us a brief sort of based on this idea of these heads with these different emotions, and we kind of just answered that brief. We kind of went down a few different sort of roads at the start. We kind of went a little bit more stylized, a little bit more abstract, before sort of settling on the sort of more realistic interpretation of the brief. And it's kind of, this style is where We Buy Your Kids in general is really sort of going these days, where it's replacing texture with patterns and shapes and things like that. And we really just wanted to capture these emotions, and hopefully do MIFF proud.
I think you've done very well, sir. I think it's fantastic.
Again, stop it. No compliments, please.
Please. Alrighty. Well, Mr. Bernard Caleo, on the other end of the spectrum,
yes,
you're actually, as we said, a comics connoisseur, a creator of comics with an X, I believe, not an S. And you also co-directed a film dealing with the Melbourne graphic novel scene. And of course, with any film, you need to have a poster to advertise it.
Apparently.
And I believe you have a bit of a presentation for how you kind of arrived at the poster that is the call sake of your film.
I do indeed. And I really have to credit the man who made this poster, Pat Grant, who's an amazing graphic novelist from Sydney. He lives in Austin near Wollongong. But Pat's in the film, so we talk in the film. We speak to 4 different graphic novelists. I and the filmmaker Daniel Haywood. We interviewed these people. We're having our last interview with Pat. So this is in 2012. Went up to New South Wales and was interviewing him. And we just heard that we'd been accepted to show the film at Angoulême, which is the greatest comic book festival in the world. It's in France. You eat a lot of cheese, and we were very, very excited, but we didn't have any money. We couldn't, how are we going to get there? And we were there, and we were sort of moaning basically to Pat, and he said, "Look, I will make a poster for you, and it will be so." And we said that will be very good, and then you can crowdfund that. Fantastic, great. Pat was on board, so Pat then has this great document of the way he went about making that poster. I'm just going to move this around a bit so I can look. I was pretty happy about that. So he started, and he's a designer and a comic book maker, and he started with these ideas on his on a sketchbook, trying to get the whole the Melbourne thing happening. So he started out with some trams, and he kept going with trams and having this sort of band sort of way about it. And then he realised that this was boring. This was a really not a very interesting poster for him to make or for us to look at. So he started to put get going a bit of an angle. That was the first way we spelt graphic novels. Melbourne was 3 exclamation marks, one after each word. Dan, my collaborator, beat me down to 2. So now it's called graphic novels, Melbourne. So there's only 2. That would have been my pick. And then Pat realised that he wanted to actually do this incredibly detailed. Is it called isomorphic?
Isometric.
Isometric. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Isometric. So he ruled up this grid, and here's a couple of examples of isometric. The thing about isometric is it doesn't have vanishing points. Oh, sorry, Oren. Is that better? Great. I'm just going to keep my hand like this, Jason, can you just massage me there a little? Thanks, man. That's better. Okay. This is another isometric. If my sons were here, they'd be very happy about that. So these examples of isometric genius. And there's Pat. Once he's penciled the whole thing, so it's a very comics way of going about making a piece of artwork. Pencil it first, then you go in with ink, drawing with ink, ink pens. There's a close-up. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but you can see Michael Fakaris, who's a Melbourne street artist that he's drawn in a tiny little corner up there, putting some work on the wall. So Pat, even though he's from New South Wales, really, he spent some time here in Melbourne, loves the Melbourne comics crew. There it is, inked up. And then he put it into, and he's sort of playing around with colour. So he thought he was always working with the idea that green and orange would be fantastic. And he put it on his computer and he vomited because he realised how awful it was. So he changed that idea. You go into this sort of, and what Pat talks about when he talks about making this poster, he talks about making a Pooh Brown poster. And so he worked about and found the Pooh Brown poster. And so this is a beautiful infomatic from Pat about the different layers, because he actually screen printed a whole run of them. That's what we crowdfunded to get ourselves overseas. These are the different layers. There you go, and that's the finished thing. Oh, we made it. That's. And the thing about this poster, and as Zak has said, it's comics with an IX man, because that's street. So it's called graphic novels, Melbourne, and amongst comic book makers, graphic novels is a bit of a hoity-toity sort of term. It's a term that they use in bookshops and in schools to sort of give comics some sort of literary-ness. But everybody in... Oh.
No.
That was almost another knife fight.
You wait. There's a car park around here, right?
Right, yeah. All the people in their tiny little word balloons are all saying comics. So the graphic is working against or warring with the title of the film.
Bernard, was there any ever any consideration of having a non-graphic novel poster for them? I mean, marketing a film is a large part of it. Was there any ever push to get maybe something that wasn't so perhaps inbuilt to the narrative there? Did you ever have any sort of distributor input saying, oh, maybe if we had a not so much comicsy cover? I mean, obviously, as independent filmmakers, you strive for that sort of signatory final poster approval.
Well, we were so independent that in fact this was way before all this stuff. Getting the cover, making a poster was months, maybe a year before we found a distributor for the film. So yeah,
that's fantastic stuff. That's the best way to do it, I think, in order to have full control. So brilliant. All right. Well, thank you very much for that, sir. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank
you. Fantastic. Well, you can also check that out, I believe. You can purchase the film online and also in all good DVD and book retailers, I believe, as the saying goes. Moving on, we're going to have a chat to Jeremy here. And Jeremy, as we said, that you are really quite a renowned poster artist in many respects, and you've worked over a lot of posters, but I think a lot of the viewing public would be aware of. Could you kind of take us through how you got into being a poster designer and the sort of projects that you have come to work on?
Initially, it was totally by accident. I happened to go to a nightclub. There were people making. There were people making a film there, and I complimented one of them on her coat. I mean, really, it was as simple as that. And she happened to be the producer of a documentary about a guy called Jamie Leonardo, who's a bit of a Sydney icon, really.
Sydney film, very film aficionado. Yep.
And they eventually found out I did graphic design and asked me if I'd wanted to do a poster. And I'd kind of been quite obsessed with film posters from when I was a kid. I've told the story a while about how I hadn't ever gone to the movies as much as I wanted to, so I would experience the movies by proxy by looking through the newspaper and looking at the film posters, which at the time in the 70s, because I'm really old, were those sort of James Bond posters where there's a bit of everything from the film on the poster. There's a car chase and a crocodile and a gun and there's chicks and the whole thing. And so you can recreate on some extent the movie in your mind without seeing it. And that was really what kind of those echoes of that had always stayed with me, and I think that's why I'd always been fascinated with movie posters. Okay. And you know, the film industry in Australia is pretty tiny, but the good thing is if you do a good job, people will tell their friends and they'll tell their friends, and pretty soon I was doing features, and you know, it just hasn't really stopped since then. Touch wood.
Fantastic stuff. So in terms of like dealing with larger studio productions, as you are often doing, we're looking at the poster for The Rover here, for example. Now this is the final, or one of the final posters that we have. Could you kind of take us through the process of how early you're brought on board to a project, say for example The Rover, and you know, do you see a script or do you see a rough cut? Do you get kind of storyboards?
How we end up with the cliche of the hero with his back to the camera looking to
he's not looking over destruction though. He's looking over.
We're playing with the cliche.
Exactly. Morphing the cliche.
Post-structuralist. Yeah. With The Rover, because I've known Dave Michaud for a long time, and Liz Watts, who produced it, I've worked on all of Porchlight Film stuff for a long time, and they were very keen to bring me on board. I read a script. They usually, like with Animal Kingdom, we had to do marketing, like A4 sheets that they take to film festivals to encourage people to spend money on the film. With The Rover, they didn't have to do it so much because Animal Kingdom had gone gangbusters and they had Rob Patterson wanting to be in it. And so they gave me the script and asked me to come up with some ideas before they started shooting, because the disadvantage of having people like Guy Pearce and Robert Patterson in your film is once the film's shot, that's it, they're off, they're on something else. So you need to get stuff while they're there on the day. So we had a whole set shot over one afternoon based on designs that I'd created, none of which looked anything like the end poster by the time we'd finished with it. But the problem, I mean, I don't know if you've got some more to show?
I've just got that one of The Rover.
Right, okay.
But we do have the next one, Holding the Man as well, but we can go back if you have some more Rover anecdotes.
This was a whole palaver because the Americans were doing their own design at the same time, and they had a company called Ignition Print, who are the biggest key art design place in the world. They're huge. And everybody, in a very Australian way, was waiting for them to come up with something better than I'd done, including me. And then the poster they come up with was honestly not very interesting. So we kind of had to run very quickly and use some not great artwork as one of the posters. But fortunately, I just sent this off with that poster at the end of one day. And David Michaud saw it and really liked it. And so they eventually used it as the teaser. And I have to say, if there is a film where the protagonist has his back to you, completely not acknowledging you or giving you any kind of hint as to his motivations or his desires, this film is the one that deserves it.
The Rover is the one to do it on, yeah, completely. So moving on into one of your most recent works, and obviously the MIFF Centrepiece film for this year, Holding the Man. You know, it's a really arresting poster image, I think. You know, in a time when we did mention that a lot of posters do focus on a lot of kind of, you know, facial motifs and a lot of concentrating on the performances. This does seem to sort of breathe a little bit of fresh air into that. For me, I feel, because there is a real kind of striking nature to it. What was the sort of process of creating this, and you know, what was the sort of input that you had with the filmmakers?
Well, this was one of the films that, you know, we went and had a meeting. We discussed at some length how we were going to market Holding the Man, because there were two very distinct markets for this film, and it is marketing, so you have to bear that in mind. For a lot of Australia, like gay Australian males, this is like a sacred text, and we wanted to make sure that the people for whom that was the case knew that this film was going to do that book justice, because it's an incredible love story. People are very passionate about it, and it inspires great feelings of love and admiration just for the book and the people in it. So it's important to get like that kind of core gay audience excited and feel like we hadn't sold it short. At the same time, that audience is not going to pay for the making of a film like Cult of the Man. So you need to get the key art house audience involved, who happen generally to be middle class, female skewed people over 40. That's the key art house audience that every poster I've ever made has been made for them. And you know, so you don't want to scare people too much, and you want to say this is a love story for everybody, as the tagline says. And we had we'd come up with a very strict photo shoot where I was going to have them on a roof of a Sydney, Sydney rooftop after a long night out, and they were going to be in love, and it was going to be open, and it wasn't going to be claustrophobic, or there was going to be no mention of death or anything like that, and it was going to be lovely. And then they sent me through 8,000 photographs, and none of them kind of felt quite right until I got to this one, which, believe it or not, was about 7,950. And there's just something about it, like they seem like a couple in love, and it seems like it doesn't feel oppressive or claustrophobic. It's not heavy. Like I did a poster for Candy, which ostensibly is not too different to this, but it's a much more tight, you in that relationship with them, and it's kind of grotty and close. And we couldn't afford to have that with this relationship because it's such an open book and an open film. And so that was where I went. And the twinkles just
works. Excellent. Well, if you're lucky enough to have a ticket to that, I don't believe it's very close to selling out, and if not, the film comes out in cinemas very soon as well. Jeremy, thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Cheers. And we'll just move on to the next thing here. So if you want to impart any of the knowledge that you're learning in this panel, feel free to tweet with the hashtag MIFF2015TP, TP standing for Talking Pictures. Donna, we're going to jump over to a slightly different realm, but very in keeping with the synergy of the design of a film and looking at title sequences. For me, I love title sequences almost as much as I love posters because, you know, if I see titles over screen action, I immediately think of Law and Order television sometimes. So it's fantastic to have a title sequence introduce a film. For me, it opens you up to the world of the film. It sets the tone of the film. Could you tell us a little bit about how you approach titles and if it's a consultation with a filmmaker and what part of the process are you brought on board in?
Well, I guess it's probably like for everyone here on the panel, it varies depending on which production and which producers and directors you're working with. Obviously, our ideal scenario is, sorry, I'll just change this. Our ideal scenario is to be brought on, like everyone, to be brought on really early in the piece. And that's happening more and more at the moment. Thanks to our American friends, title sequences, particularly in Australian television, have really, in the last few years, producers and networks, most importantly, are putting a lot of emphasis on them. So everyone's coming to us these days and saying they want Game of Thrones, of course, for the budget that's about, the shoe of one of the cast members. But still, the aspirations are high now because, you've got your Deadwoods and you've got your Game of Thrones and things. So people are now wanting that to be part of particularly television at the moment in Australia. And they're the ones that we love. We get brought on quite early in that situation, and we're lucky enough to have an established relationship with quite a few of the bigger production houses these days who do bring us in quite early. We get the chance to read some scripts, to see some cast, and then it's a bit of a backwards and forwards. We're often either on the shoot when the shoot's happening because we're doing a separate little sub-shoot. And so I think that we often find the work sort of speaks for itself when you have been brought on in that early stage, and you do become sort of the brand makers, I guess, of the production. It's really important that we, even though we're all interested in our different art forms, whether they be poster making or filmmaking or whatever, we are actually, at the end, without sounding crass, we are marketing a production to people, whether it be a television show or whether it be a film, and there is a person, an audience, or if you dare to say it, a consumer who is going to choose or not to choose to be part of that experience. audience. And so for us, we really love finding out about the producers' sort of intentions for the demographics of the film. It is often it's often the woman in their 40s, but no, these days we've had a really diverse slate actually. So and we love getting across who that demographic is and thinking about what makes them tick. And then usually the first thing we do is think about that actual logo. We call it a logo. It's the title of the film or the title of the TV series, but we call it a logo because that's what it is. And the idea for us, the goal for us, is that logo is then taken across synergistically across the whole campaign for the TV show or for the film, and it's used on all the 2D material and obviously in 3D and on broadcast. So we get involved quite early. Our big thing is we love meeting with the director and the production designer and getting a sense of the palette of the film and the tone of the film. And I guess, the sort of work that we love to do is we love to do standalone, almost slightly abstract sequences. We sort of have this feeling, I suppose. And when I say we, I'm part of a collective called Plus Films. So I'm just sitting up here, but there's a team of us that create these sequences. But I guess we get together and we always do a return brief back to the filmmaking team or the network team. And that's an incredibly important part of things because often filmmakers have been so close in on the production that they've been doing, they haven't actually, which is completely fair enough, been able to stand back and think what is the thing that will best market this project. So we give them back a return brief on what we believe will be those things. And they're sort of the key triggers that we're trying to achieve, whether it be intrigue or whether it be mystery or whether it be, a comedy, or we come back to them with these triggers that then when we present our concepts, we make sure that checklist of that return brief has been met, which gives us more of a chance for us all to come on the same page, I guess. So,
yeah, it sounds fantastic. I mean, I think, it's interesting that you mentioned that sort of cinematic television concept that's kind of struck into cable productions and higher end productions. I think that it really does sort of set the tone and space for it. Where did your passion for title design come from, Donna? It seems like a very kind of specific area to get into. Was it a filmmaking past that you had, or moved into that, or how did you sort of arrive at that as your main output?
Well, it's been quite organic. I began life as a graphic designer, and then I moved into advertising when I was art directing and copywriting and advertising. And from there, I started to produce a couple of shorts with some collective of mates. So I then became a producer. And then I wanted to make really nice titles for the films we were working on. So I decided to make my own. So, and then from that, we just, really fell in love with the idea that you get the privilege to sort of tap into a production for a short amount of time and sort of make a comment, or if you like, make a sort of cinematic red curtain as to how people sort of view the story that's to follow. And we've just become really passionate about it. And as I said, we're sort of lucky we've been part of a changing time in Australia where more emphasis is going onto it. And a little bit more budget, a little bit more.
I believe we have some examples of your work here. And we're running a little short on time, so we'll have to stop it there, Donna. But in terms of the audience being able to look at some further of your reel, what's the best place? Is there a website that they go to for your production company?
Yeah, plusfilms.com.au is probably the best spot.
Fantastic, all right. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Jason.
Hey.
Let's talk about Deathgasm.
Let's.
So Deathgasm's poster had a slightly different trail to existence as some of the other works that we're talking about. Fill us in. How do we arrive at this, paean to death metal culture?
Yeah, so I was working in Melbourne. I arrived back to New Zealand, and there was this competition called the Make My Horror Movie competition. And basically it was $200K to make a horror film. And so, I'm a huge horror fan, so I knew I had to apply for this. And I ended up, so what to do when you're applying for the competition is submit like a poster and then like pretty much a one-pager, like a logline synopsis. And I think I did 5 ideas in total, just went into Photoshop. Yeah, I feel very outclassed in this panel, but anyway, yeah. So I think I whipped this up in about say maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. It's actually my hand up there as well.
It's a nice little cameo of the artist.
Yeah, I never. I mean, I think if I knew it was going to be at a MIFF panel, I would have spent 4 hours on it. And I think based on, I think the poster art had a lot to do with getting selected. Mm-hmm. It was something that was very easy for the judges to grasp. Obviously, there's the classic heavy metal symbol, universal, and having the 2 fingers severed, indicating horror. There's going to be some splatter involved. I think that was a very clear concept for everyone to get on board with.
I mean, it reminds me of that fantastic quote from, I think it's the biopic of Ed Wood, where the Hollywood producer says, "We haven't got a script, we haven't got a film, but we've got a poster." I mean, that's it's kind of in that line. As you mentioned, working and being a fan of the horror genre, there's a lot of horror movie poster cliches, I suppose, for lack of a better word, or identifiers. Did you feel that you needed to steer clear of any of those, or sort of like actively engage them more to get awareness?
I think I probably engaged them a lot. It's a little dark here, but there's it's got a kind of a grungy texture on the. You can kind of sit there and
sort of grindhouseian, sort of like ripped turds and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I kind of embraced that kind of thing a lot, and which seems to have paid off a lot. Obviously it's very minimalist. Like very, very simplistic, which I think kind of helped as well. And I just chucked some generic kind of text down the bottom to make it look kind of authentically grindhouse. They're actually, it's funny because they use that poster at festivals and stuff, and like the names are just made up. They're like, I think I Alan Smithied myself there. It actually says Alan Smithy. There's Charles Lee Ray from Child's Play, like all these kind of weird little references, and people see the poster, they're like, what the hell's going on? But that's, I never intended it to go that far, and there is actually like a real designer is doing a poster at the moment, so we're going to have an actual, probably more in line with, like the Turbo Kid sort of, I haven't actually seen anything, so let's see what happens. Also, there's actually a vinyl record coming out from Death Waltz Records. And so that's getting designed by a guy called Wes Ben Skoda, mm-hmm. who's like he designed albums for like Slayer and Cattle Decapitation, all these awesome metal bands. So looking forward to seeing what he does with it. But it's interesting we're talking about branding and the titles as well, because the logo that we're using on a lot of the T-shirts and stuff at the moment is from my good friend Wade Cowan, who designed the title sequence. The Deathgasm title is from what he designed in the titles, which is kind of an odd sort of backwards thing.
So I like it. I like you projected the movie out there and people are taking it up. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, as you see, we could probably talk about posters for absolute hours, but we do have a little bit of time for the audience to ask some questions of our esteemed panel. So just raise your hand up for me and we'll be able to get a mic over there. Let's just do a rip around. Everyone. Okay. First thing that comes to your head.
I think it's Vertigo. Amazing. I had that on my wall for a long time. Very, very minimalist, simplistic. Beautiful.
The king of posters.
Yeah.
There's a dreadful film and a great poster. Was the first of the new version of the Star Wars films, which just had a little boy, the Anakin Skywalker boy, no text on it whatsoever, and from him streaming the shadow of Darth Vader curling up over one of those little Tatooine houses. And that was the best thing that came out of all of those three films. It was beautiful. It was stark. It relied on the fact that we all know what's going on. You don't need any text on it whatsoever. It was I really love that.
Sonny?
Jaws. Perfect poster for probably the perfect movie. It works so well because it's just this movie's about a giant shark that eats people, and it works. It totally works, and it's one of those things that can never really, even with all this Mondo stuff, no one can touch that poster. It's just the bomb.
Canonised. Yeah. Donna, inversely, maybe a title sequence that's been a huge influence for you.
Well, I was going to say, of course, as the title designer, I have to say Sol Bass, because just, wow, the old stuff, the new stuff, I love it all. So, and obviously his title sequences as well are a real inspiration.
Jeremy?
Classic would be Robert McGuinness's poster for Live and Let Die.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a pretty great one. And the best Australian one, I think, is Noise, which is just such a beautiful poster.
Again,
always in awe of it.
Touching on that kind of minimalism as well. So, fantastic. Okay, any other, just one right up the back.
When we got computers.
I mean, that's always a good sign. Yeah,
that time.
Yeah.
Well, and it's definitely a time factor too. You know what I mean? Like those illustrated posters would have taken a long time to do. So everything's about getting things out quickly and saving money. So it's easy to do things on a computer than actually sit down and spend 3 months doing a drawing like Drew Struzan or those kinds of things too. And I think it's also, I don't know, a lot of money goes into making films these days. So posters just need to, like you were saying before, Jeremy, they need to speak to the audience straight away, and they kind of, as much as you'd like to be kind of having crazy things going on and like illustrating posters, it's just, I guess it's not viable in some ways.
You've got to play it safe, and by that stage of the process, the film is still generally not quite finished. Nobody really knows what they've got. Everybody just wants to play it as safe as possible. But also, like, I think tropes evolve over time, and the poster has always had to tell the story, tell you who's in it, what their jobs are, all of that stuff, and that's quite a lot of heavy lifting. So a lot of cliches evolve as a shorthand to get people in the right space. Like comedy posters always have white backgrounds, and horror movies always have just one thing on the poster, and thrillers lit from the side. It just helps get that message across as quickly as possible.
But I mean, what you're saying, being tropes and cycles, I think because there's this whole sort of nostalgia going on at the moment, like there is a demand for like a teaser poster that like harks back to those 70s styles posters. So it's kind of cool that there's a market for both of those things these days, and people are willing, like marketing people and the filmmakers are willing to take risks on these little one-off things to kind of get people hyped about the movie before general release, right?
Yeah. And I think we're moving into a slightly more interesting period now, honestly, because as we were saying earlier on, trailers are much more prevalent, and they will do a lot better job at expressing so much about the film than the poster can. So the poster actually is freed up a little bit to be a bit more interesting and just push people towards the trailer rather than having to sell a ticket on its own,
So that new Mission Impossible poster then, that's a retro poster. That's referring back to those posters that you were reading in the newspaper. Like it's got everything that happens in that film is on the poster.
Really?
Yeah. It's got like 20 images on it.
I see that new Mission Impossible poster to be prevalent of what's going on today. It's like looking at a Marvel poster. It's like got all the characters and there's a little bit going on in the background, the villains flying around or whatever. It's just that style. That needs to kind of let people know this is an action movie and it's going to have Tom Cruise in it and Jeremy Renner's not going to smile.
It's very serious business. There's an interesting point you kind of both touch on there, gentlemen. Sonny, how often would you get to turn around a poster? And I'll also put the same question to Jeremy. What is your sort of like base turnaround time for, say, a standard sort of project?
For Mondo and things like that, like it varies. It can be a month, it can be 2 weeks, depending on on when the schedule, I mean, obviously with our stuff for Mondo, things need to be screen printed, so that needs to be taken into account. So if it's for a screening, you know, maybe 4 to 6 weeks that we'll have before it needs to go off to print.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeremy, how about yourself?
Antichrist was the shortest one. That took about an hour and a half. And I was going on holiday. It had to be done very quickly. And in fact, I didn't even see the film. So and Animal Kingdom was probably the longest one, and that took about 2 years.
Wow.
Not exclusively. I did other things.
Yeah, but it's slowly
but you know,
chipping
from
away.
beginning to end, it was probably 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're right, it's all about the dollar with the commercial networks, that's for sure. We don't tend to work on, we were about to work on House Husbands, and then it got shortened, and so we chose not to do that. We do cards sometimes, but our specialty is longer, sort of more conceptual sequences that introduce a show. But it is, I think it's still about half and half. It depends. Pay TV is doing a lot of fantastic title sequences, but you're right, commercial networks, their priority is definitely the time and the dollar.
Yeah. We go to nightclubs, clearly.
Yeah. Have a good time.
Everybody you meet about their coat, and even if you don't get a job in Kia, you'll give people a nice day.
Yeah, like how important is a folio? You know,
it's really important.
Really important, yeah. And
It's essential.
Yeah.
It's not who you know, or can be like that sometimes, but it's all going to come back to how strong your work is. And having that sort of focus, if you want to do key art for films, and that's all you should do. But yeah. I don't know. There's no secret. Sorry, Jeremy.
Sorry.
There's no like magic trick to sort of break into that kind of industry. Like, yeah, it just happens, and I really do believe the stronger that your work is, the stronger your chances are of getting into that industry that you want to work in.
I'd definitely suggest. You know, short filmmakers always want posters for their films, even if they don't need them. And it's really good practice. I mean, every film you watch, especially the films that you don't quite get, do posters for them. Or what would I do if I was doing a poster for that? And just make yourself deconstruct films as you're watching them and spoil the whole experience of ever watching a film again for yourself, and just break it down. What's this theme? Why is this scene here? What's it saying? And just learn to watch films in that way, and just do art all the time as much as you can. And occasionally you'll be working for free to start with, but
all
you
the
know,
time. Still do it.
It's all about the folio, and a lot of it's just experience. But the most important things are your ideas, and you need to train your brain to think like that, and you know, pull films apart really.
Great. And Donna, that would obviously be very similar with title design as well.
Yeah, true. I think what we all do here in some form is communication. And so I think as well, like the relationships you have with people are incredibly important. We've now got a group of producers and filmmakers that we've had ongoing contact with from the very start. We obviously did jobs in the beginning for not a lot of money in order to be part of the production. And now we have a relationship with those people, and they've gone on to do other productions, and we continue to do things with them. So, you know, relationships and connection with people is key as well. I love this question because the music's such an important part for us. And so there was another couple of sequences I was going to show you, and there was real variations in how that happened with the music. With Tangle, Bryony Marks, a wonderful, wonderful composer, we actually finished the complete sequence, and then we went and sat in sessions with her where she played things, and we sort of made that work to have that sort of fantasy fairy tale sound with a little bit of an off-kilter. Oh my God, something else is going on, there's something darker here. And Bryony composed it completely to a finished sequence. With the slap, Anthony Patos already had a great thematic musical score sort of going through the slap, and so we wanted something sort of heavy, operatic, kind of tense feeling, but it all came from the palette of the music he'd already created for the slap, and then we tweaked it in terms of it, you know, when a bit of the plate would bing off the the bass, he would then add some little parts to it. So it's a backwards and forwards process with the composer. There was another one called Hiding that was in a recent ABC series where it was actually Hit the Road Jack was the song that the sequence is to. So obviously that's an existing track that we had in our minds as we were creating the sequence. And the other one we were going to show you was Puberty Blues, and that was the Dragon, Am I Old Enough classic. And we were given that by the director, by Glendon Ivan, which was a great inspiration for what to do for that one.
Excellent. Well, I have a final question because we have run out of time, and as you said, we could clearly talk about movie design for hours, and 60 minutes is scarcely enough to scratch the ink, as I would say. But how can we look at your work, and where can we kind of see from here? Jason, how can people engage with Deathgasm? Aside from the obvious.
Is this a cue to do my pitch for Saturday?
Yes. Yeah.
So Saturday 11:30. It's playing at MIFF. And also Friday the 14th, I think 9:30.
Is there a website that people can go to?
Yeah, our website's pretty scarce. It just takes you to the Facebook page. We're currently working on that, but also on the Facebook or Twitter we'll announce like VOD or DVD release as well, which Madman Entertainment in Australia are releasing it. So
great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Mr. Caleo, how can people find you online? You're a man about town,
I'm
but
a man
online.
about town. There is a screening of Graphic Novels Melbourne coming up down at Readings in St Kilda on Wednesday, the 16th of September. So that's come into the bookshop, eat some wine, drink some cheese, that sort of thing. But I'm Cardigan Comics. So if you can look for Cardigan Comics, you'll find me and my various projects, comics and otherwise.
Fantastic. Yeah. Sonny, obviously, We Buy Your Kids is on the internet, but...
Yeah, we've been on the internet for a couple of days now, so
it's been really good. I don't know if you've been on it.
It's really good stuff.
It's a whirlwind.
Video with a cat. It's fantastic. So I recommend going. wbyk.com.au. But Instagram's really good for us, so at We Buy Your Kids, one word. That's where you can find us.
And Donna, obviously, as you mentioned as well, that one as well. And do you have any productions coming up that we can look forward to seeing some titles on?
We've just been working in LA actually on a new feature. So it's called The Devil's Candy, but it won't be out for a little bit of time. I think at the moment Maximum Choppage is just, I think it's been on for a little while now here in Australia, hasn't it? And we're doing a new documentary for Eva Orner, who is the originally Melbourne-based producer who's now in LA, who won the Oscar there a couple of years ago. So she's doing a fantastic documentary feature called Asylum, which we're working on currently.
Fantastic. And Jeremy, how can people find you?
Vanity Domain, jeremysaunders.com.
Easy. Well, thank you once again, all of you, for being involved this afternoon. And as we mentioned before, if you'd like to let people know how much you've learned about movie poster design and movie title design today, please hashtag MIFF 2015 TP. Thanks again to Afters and MIFF and the Wheeler Centre, and we'll see you in front of the movie kiosk. Thank you. Cheers.